This video is in response to a question that Jehovah's Witnesses are confronted with from time to time regarding who it was that resurrected Jesus. On one occasion, Jesus said to the Jews, "Tear down this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And of course, they thought he was talking about the stone temple there, but it goes on to mention that he was talking about the temple of his body. And so that scripture is construed to mean that Jesus was going to raise himself up. But that is not the case. According to the Apostle Peter, God resurrected Jesus. Oh, but Jesus is God, so he resurrected himself. No. Let me read this passage to you in Acts, the 2nd chapter. And in verse 24, Peter said, "But God resurrected him by loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to continue to be held fast by it." And then going on, it says, "For David says respecting him, I had Jehovah constantly before my eyes, because he is at my right hand, that I may never be shaken." And then moreover, it says, "Even my flesh will reside in hope, because you will not leave my soul in Hades, neither will you allow your loyal one to see corruption." So Jehovah resurrected his son Jesus. But what did Jesus mean when he said that he would raise it up? To understand that passage, go to the 10th chapter of John, where Jesus was referring to himself as the shepherd who gives his life in behalf of the sheep. And reading in verse 17, Jesus said, "This is why the Father loves me, because I surrender my soul, in order that I may receive it again. No man has taken it away from me, but I surrender it of my own initiative. I have authority to surrender it, and I have authority to receive it again. The commandment on this I received from my Father." So Jesus' death was quite different than the common death of all men. You and I, and everyone else, are under the condemnation of death. We're going to die. We've inherited it. Adam was created a perfect man. He forfeited that. And as a consequence, Paul explained, death has spread to all men. So if Jehovah consents to give us a resurrection, it's entirely out of the goodness of his heart. We do nothing to merit a resurrection from the dead. But Jesus, on the other hand, was a perfect man. The Apostle Paul called him the second man, meaning he was the second man that God created, Adam being the first, but he became an imperfect sinner, and Jehovah put him to death. Jehovah transferred the life of his heavenly Son into the womb of Mary, and he became the second perfect man. The last Adam, also, Paul referred to him. So he was not under the condemnation of death that you and I are. So there was no reason for him to die. But it was Jehovah's will in order for him to pay this ransom. Jesus did not wish to die. If you recall in his prayer to God the night before he was put to death, he said, "If it's possible, Father, take this cup away from me, but not what I will, but what you will." So Jesus submitted himself to do God's will, and that involved giving his life. He had authority to lay it down, and he had authority to receive it back. Now, what did he mean by that? By Jesus being faithful and loyal to God, God was obligated to resurrect him. And the reason God was obligated is because God is a lover of justice. Jesus did not deserve to die. And there was no way, as the scripture I read, that God would allow his loyal one to stay in the grave, in the pit. So Jesus had authority by being loyal to God. He could choose to be loyal to God to the very end, submitting himself to this death, and he would have authority to take back his life because he knew that God would be obligated to give it back to him. If Jesus had been disloyal, he would not have received his soul back again. So his destiny was in his own hands, you might say. One more passage I'd like to share with you is in Hebrews chapter 5. Should have put some bookmarkers in here. Yeah. Chapter 5, verse 7. It says, "In the days of his flesh, Christ offered up supplications and also petitions to the one who was able to save him out of death, with strong outcries and tears, and he was favorably heard for his godly fear." Now, Jesus didn't fear himself, did he? It plainly says that God was able to save him from death. And by Jesus being loyal to him, Jehovah did, in fact, save him from death. He was dead for parts of 3 days, and then he came back to life. And in that way, he built up the temple of his body, as he said. So it has nothing to do with Jesus being God. The scriptures plainly say that God resurrected Jesus, and Jesus was loyal to his God. That's it.